Ethan's footsteps hesitated at the edge of the hallway. He could hear his father's voice, loud and sharp, slicing through the quiet of the house like a blade. Every word carried anger and expectation, a weight Ethan had learned to fear over the years. The living room ahead looked familiar. The worn-out couch, the faded carpet, the pictures on the wall that told stories of a family that once seemed happy. Now it all felt strange, distant, like he was walking into someone else's world. His father's shouting made that world feel even smaller, more suffocating. "Your brother's moving in. You owe us." The words hit him like a slap. Ethan froze at the doorway. He recognized the tone, the way his father always framed things. To make him feel guilty, responsible, like the failure of the household rested on his shoulders. He wanted to step back, to avoid the fight, to pretend he hadn't heard. But something inside him refused to let this moment pass. His eyes fell on Daniel, his younger brother, standing awkwardly behind their father. Daniel looked uneasy, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his eyes avoiding Ethan's. Ethan remembered a time when Daniel had been his closest friend, the one he could trust. But years of manipulation and favoritism had changed that. Daniel had grown comfortable staying quiet, letting Ethan take the blame for everything that went wrong. And now, with the mortgage crisis looming over him, Ethan saw the final proof of betrayal. His family had made him pay for mistakes he didn't even make. The mortgage. That word burned in Ethan's mind like fire. He had spent months trying to understand the sudden debt crushing his name, tracking every signature, every document. And then he discovered it, the forgery. His father had taken a pen and signed Ethan's name to a mortgage he never agreed to, putting him at risk, chaining him to a debt he didn't owe. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. They had worked hard, done everything asked, and yet he had been set up to carry the blame while his father and brother walked free. Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes steady on his father. No hesitation this time. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He simply said, "I know about the forged mortgage." The words hung in the air like a challenge, quiet but full of weight. For a moment, the room seemed to stop breathing. His father froze, his confident posture faltering, the redness draining from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it again, searching for words that wouldn't come. Daniel blinked rapidly, as if trying to process a truth he hadn't expected. The dynamic shifted instantly. The blame, the power, the fear, tilted. Ethan wasn't the scared, powerless one anymore. Ethan's mind raced, but his voice stayed calm. He thought about all the nights he had lain awake, drowning in worry. Over bills, over responsibilities no one asked him to take on, over mistakes that weren't his. He remembered the time he had argued with his father about paying off the house, only to have his efforts dismissed. He remembered the times he had covered for Daniel when things went wrong, always taking the heat. And now, for the first time, he held the truth like a weapon, not to hurt, not to scream, but to claim his own space. The room remained silent for several long seconds. Ethan could hear his father's uneven breathing, the slight shuffle of feet as he realized he had been caught. The power balance had shifted, and it was palpable. Ethan didn't feel triumph yet. He felt clarity. He felt the beginning of a fire that had been smoldering for years, anger tempered with purpose. Daniel finally looked up, his face pale, confusion and fear mixed into his expression. I didn't know," he stammered, voice small, almost a whisper. He tried to speak, to explain, to defend, but the words sounded weak in the tension-filled room. Ethan saw him as he truly was, complicit by silence, guilty in his inaction. It hurt more than his father's betrayal. Family should be a team, and Daniel had chosen to stay in the shadows, leaving Ethan exposed. Ethan's heart pounded, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Every memory, every sleepless night, every moment of feeling powerless surged inside him. He could feel the walls of the room closing in, the weight of years pressing down. Yet, for the first time, he didn't shrink. He didn't falter. He realized something crucial: he had power now, not just to fight, but to change the course of what came next. His father's face had turned pale. The anger was gone, replaced with something Ethan had rarely seen: fear. It was a subtle fear, not loud or dramatic, but real. A fear that someone had seen through the lies, the manipulations, the years of control. His father had always counted on Ethan to take the blame, to absorb the consequences, to stay quiet. But that was no longer possible. Ethan had uncovered the truth, and the truth carried consequences that could not be ignored. Ethan's eyes moved from his father to Daniel. He thought about trust, about loyalty, about the moments that had built and broken their bond. He thought about how betrayal felt when it came from the people you love most. He realized revenge wasn't just about punishing his father. It was about reclaiming the life he had been forced to give away piece by piece. The anger simmered, but beneath it, a more strategic part of him emerged, the part that knew revenge required patience, observation, and precision. He didn't need to shout, he didn't need to storm out. He just watched them: the father who had lied, the brother who had stayed silent hand. He waited. He let the weight of his discovery settle between them. It was heavy, but it was his. He had uncovered the truth, and now finally he could plan. He could prepare. He could take control. Ethan left the room without another word, leaving his father frozen, Daniel confused, and the air thick with tension. Outside, the world continued. As usual, cars passing, neighbors chatting, the wind brushing against the windows. But inside, everything had changed. The balance of power had shifted. Ethan was no longer a victim. He was someone to be reckoned with. And for the first time in years, he felt alive, not trapped by guilt, fear, or expectation. He felt the spark of what was coming next, the careful, deliberate, inevitable move that would reclaim what was his. This was just the beginning. Betrayal had been exposed, and revenge had begun, not with fire or shouting, but with truth. Ethan knew the path ahead would be difficult. He knew his emotions would be tested, and he would wrestle with questions of morality and justice. But for now, he felt the first taste of freedom, and it was intoxicating. He had planted the seed of reckoning, and soon it would grow. Ethan walked down the hallway, each step measured, deliberate. The house felt smaller now, constricted by the secrets laid bare. But that constriction was not suffocating, it was empowering. He had taken the first move in a long game. He had exposed the forgery, and in doing so, he had exposed the cracks in his family, the lies that had built their fragile foundation. And as he reached the front door, opening it to step outside into the cool evening, he felt the surge of a single thought, clear and unshakable. He was ready. Ready to face the next stage. Ready to confront the betrayal. Ready to see justice done not recklessly, not angrily, but deliberately. The storm had started, and Ethan would be at its center. The days after Ethan's revelation felt strange, like the house had shifted into a new dimension. The air was heavier, charged with tension, every glance carrying suspicion. His father avoided eye contact, moving through the house like a man walking on thin ice. Ethan watched quietly, noticing every twitch, every hesitation. He had spent years under the weight of their control, but now, for the first time, he had the upper hand. He didn't act on it yet, but the knowledge that he could change everything gave him a sense of power that was intoxicating and frightening at the same time. Ethan started observing his father in detail. He noticed the small cracks in his confident facade, the way his hands shook when reaching for documents, the way his eyes darted nervously whenever finances came up, the subtle hesitation before speaking. These were signs of guilt, and guilt was a weapon if used correctly. Ethan didn't need to shout, didn't need to fight. He could watch, plan, wait. Patience had become his ally. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed caught in a different struggle. He avoided Ethan at first, but soon, late one night, he appeared in the kitchen. Leaning against the counter, voice low and uncertain. "Ethan, I didn't know," he said, almost pleading. "I swear I didn't know about the mortgage. I never signed anything." I never agreed to any of it." Ethan studied him carefully. Daniel had always been impulsive, naive, a little reckless, but he wasn't cruel. Ethan wanted to believe him, but trust wasn't so easily restored. Years of watching Daniel stay quiet while he took the blame had left scars. "You didn't know," Ethan said slowly, "but you let them put everything on me. You let me carry the weight." Daniel flinched, and guilt flashed in his eyes. Ethan didn't yell, didn't curse. He let the words hang in the air, letting Daniel feel the full impact of his silence. It was a revelation, a small victory. Ethan understood that revenge wasn't just about his father. It was about reclaiming the life and respect that Daniel had, willingly or not, allowed to slip from him. Ethan began documenting everything. He revisited the mortgage papers, collected copies of emails, statements, any proof that could expose his father. Each piece was another step toward control, a calculated move toward justice. Every time he looked at the documents, a sense of clarity settled in. He wasn't planning chaos. He was planning order, his order. But the process wasn't easy. Late at night, when the house was silent, Ethan wrestled with his own conscience. He thought about what revenge meant, what it would feel like to watch his father face the consequences. He imagined the satisfaction, the power, the finality. Yet beneath that, a darker thought emerged. Would it really make him feel better? Or would it leave him hollow, alone, weighed down by a cycle of pain that never ended? His father, in his own way, tried to justify himself. He didn't approach Ethan directly. But Ethan could see the subtle efforts to maintain authority, to appear in control, to rewrite the narrative in his mind. "I did it to protect you," he would mutter under his breath, assuming Ethan wasn't listening. But Ethan knew better. He had seen the truth, and truth was sharper than any lie. The emotional struggle inside Ethan grew stronger every day. Every interaction, every glance, every conversation became a test. He questioned himself constantly. Was he right to want revenge? Was justice worth the risk of fracturing the family entirely? Could he punish his father without punishing himself? Each question felt like a weight pressing down, a reminder that this was bigger than anger. It was about identity, about reclaiming his own life from the shadow of lies. Daniel tried to reconcile with him in small ways. He offered to help with bills, to support Ethan emotionally, to stand by him. Ethan accepted some gestures but remained cautious. He couldn't forget years of betrayal overnight. The bond between them was fragile, stretched thin by history and inaction. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, carefully. Like a fragile bridge over a deep canyon, Ethan also noticed how his father responded to small challenges. When financial topics came up, the man flinched. When family members questioned his authority, he hesitated. Ethan realized that his father's power was mostly illusion. The foundation had always been fear, manipulation, and silence. Expose the lies, and the house of cards would crumble. This realization strengthened Ethan's resolve. He didn't want to destroy his father out of malice. He wanted accountability as the tension built. Ethan found himself planning scenarios in his mind. He thought about confronting his father publicly, about reporting the forgery, about forcing Daniel to stand up for himself too. Each scenario had consequences, risks, and emotional costs. He didn't rush, though. The key to real power, he understood, was patience. Rushing could ruin everything. And he wasn't willing to waste years of preparation on impulsive actions. The psychological weight of this planning became a constant companion. Ethan found himself thinking in terms of strategy, noticing patterns, predicting reactions. It was almost like a game, but the stakes were real. He felt the thrill of control, tempered by the knowledge that any misstep could backfire. Each night, he went to bed with a mind buzzing with possibilities, a heart heavy with responsibility, and a resolve that strengthened with every passing hour. Ethan also wrestled with his emotions regarding Daniel. Anger, betrayal, guilt, and loyalty all swirled inside him. Could he forgive his brother? Could he include him in the plan for justice without letting him off too easily? These questions gnawed at him, complicating the already intense situation. Yet he recognized that Daniel's cooperation could be crucial. To exact revenge or claim justice effectively, he needed allies. And Daniel was still his only potential partner. Meanwhile, his father grew more erratic, unaware that Ethan was watching. Small mistakes, slips of the tongue, moments of hesitation, all of them fed Ethan's understanding of the man he once feared. He realized that fear was no longer on his side. Knowledge was. The more he knew, the more prepared he became. And with preparation came confidence, a rare feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Through all this, Ethan began to understand the nature of revenge. It wasn't just about anger or punishment. It was about reclaiming control, setting boundaries, and asserting his own dignity. He could feel the difference between hatred and purpose. Revenge fueled by hate was fleeting. Revenge guided by justice and strategy was lasting. This insight shaped every plan, every thought, every action he considered. Weeks passed and the tension in the house became almost unbearable. Conversations were clipped, gestures minimal, the atmosphere charged with unspoken threats. Ethan felt the house responding to his silent authority. His father was no longer the untouchable figure he had once seemed. He was human, fallible, fearful, and Daniel, cautiously, began to step closer. Learning to take responsibility in small ways, Ethan realized that the real battle was not external, it was internal. He had to control his impulses, balance his anger with strategy, and decide how far he was willing to go. He understood that the moment of confrontation would define him, and he needed to be ready mentally and emotionally. For whatever came next, by the end of this part of the story, Ethan had transformed. He was no longer just a victim. He was a planner, a strategist, a young man reclaiming his life. The groundwork for revenge had been laid. But the emotional complexity, the questions of morality, loyalty, and justice remained. He was ready to take the next step, to move from observation to action. But only when he was sure of every consequence. Ethan's patience, awareness, and careful planning had given him power in a house that had once made him powerless. He understood that revenge wasn't a single act. It was a process, a series of deliberate moves that could restore balance without destroying everything. And in that understanding, he found a strange sense of calm amid the storm he had begun to stir. The house remained quiet, but Ethan's mind was anything but. Every sound, every shadow, every movement became a clue. He was no longer reactive. He was proactive. And as he prepared for what was to come, he knew one thing with certainty. He would not be defeated again. The path ahead would test him, but he had the clarity, the patience, and the resolve to see it through. Revenge was no longer just a thought. It was a plan, and Ethan was ready to execute it. The day Ethan had been preparing for finally arrived. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting pale light across the living room. Everything looked normal, calm even, but the atmosphere was electric with tension. Ethan held the folder of evidence tightly in his hands. Every document, every email, every signature, carefully gathered over weeks of observation, pointed to the truth, the forgery, the deception, the betrayal. Today, he would confront his father. And nothing would be the same afterward. His father sat in his usual spot, slouched in the worn armchair, pretending calm. But Ethan could see the small tells he had studied for weeks. The twitch of a finger, the tension around the mouth, the barely noticeable flicker in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Daniel lingered nearby, nervous, unsure of where he belonged in this confrontation. The silence stretched heavy and suffocating. Until Ethan finally spoke. "I could report this," he said, placing the folder on the coffee table with deliberate weight. "You know what this means? You know what this could cost you?" His voice was steady, cold in a way that made his father flinch. The power that had always belonged to his father was gone, replaced by truth, precision, and control. His father looked up, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that could undo the moment. For years, he had commanded the room with shouting, manipulation, and fear. But now he was powerless. Ethan could almost hear the shift in the air. the unspoken acknowledgement that the past could no longer be ignored. Daniel's eyes darted between them, anxiety mixed with guilt. He had seen the mortgage's effect on Ethan for years, had stayed silent, had let Ethan carry burdens that were never his to bear. And now the truth had finally emerged. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every injustice he had endured. Revenge had been simmering inside him, a slow-burning fire. But the moment of confrontation made it feel real, immediate, almost overwhelming. He could feel the surge of satisfaction he had imagined, the thrill of finally being in control. Yet beneath it, he recognized the danger. Anger could consume him if he wasn't careful. This confrontation was about justice, about balance, not destruction. His father's voice was trembling when he finally spoke. "Ethan, I didn't mean for any of this. I thought I was protecting the family. I never wanted to hurt you." There was no excuse in those words, only a fragile attempt at explanation. Ethan had seen fear before, but this was different. There was shame, regret, and a hint of understanding that he had misstepped in a way that could no longer be hidden. Daniel stepped forward, voice soft but firm. "We can fix this," he said, "all of us. But only if we stop destroying each other." Ethan looked at him, evaluating the sincerity in his eyes. Daniel had been part of the problem, but he was not the origin. He had a chance to choose differently now, to act responsibly. Ethan's mind raced. Could he forgive Daniel? Could he accept his brother as a partner in rebuilding what had been broken? Ethan's heart pounded. He had imagined this confrontation in countless ways, scenes of his father being humiliated, facing punishment, maybe even losing everything. But now, in the quiet tension of the living room, the reality felt different. The power lay in his hands, yes, but the true test was in the choice he would make. Would he let anger dictate his actions, or would he rise above it? Using his knowledge and preparation to create real change rather than chaos, he thought about the years of sleepless nights, the constant weight of responsibility that had never been his. The times he had worked tirelessly while his father and brother remained passive. The urge to strike back, to deliver a dramatic punishment, was strong, almost intoxicating. But Ethan's mind cleared, and he realized that revenge would not restore what had been lost. It could satisfy a momentary desire, but it would also perpetuate pain. The question now was whether he wanted to perpetuate that cycle or break it. His father's eyes searched Ethan's face. Fear mingled with a desperate hope for mercy. Ethan saw the man not as a tyrant, but as a flawed human being, capable of error, capable of regret. Daniel stood silently, tension radiating from him, waiting to see which way the decision would fall. Ethan's chest tightened, knowing that his choice here would shape the relationships in the family forever. Finally, Ethan made his decision. He closed the folder slowly, the papers inside a silent testament to the truth he had uncovered. "I'm not reporting you," he said, voice calm but resolute. His father's jaw dropped, disbelief etched across his face. "But things are going to change. Starting now. I'm not carrying this family alone anymore. And you're going to take responsibility for what you did." Shock, relief, and a mixture of fear washed over his father's face. Daniel exhaled slowly, understanding the shift in power, the new rules being set. Ethan wasn't letting them off entirely. He was demanding accountability, boundaries, and a fair share of responsibility. It was not vengeance in the way he had imagined. It was stronger than that. It was justice, tempered with restraint. Delivered with precision, the tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a cautious hope. Ethan felt a strange calm settling over him. He had prepared for confrontation, for rage, for revenge. But the reality of standing firm without destruction was different, unexpected, and profoundly satisfying. He realized that true strength lay not in tearing someone down, but in asserting boundaries, reclaiming dignity, and demanding accountability without becoming what had hurt him. For the first time in years, Ethan felt in control not just of the situation, but of himself. The power to act recklessly was tempting, but he chose restraint. He had faced the ultimate test of patience, strategy, and morality, and he had passed. The house that had once suffocated him with betrayal now felt lighter, freer, reshaped by the truth and by his choices. Daniel approached him, a tentative smile on his face. "I'll help," he said quietly. "I'll make it right, too." Ethan nodded, recognizing that while some bridges had been burned, others could be rebuilt with effort and honesty. Trust would take time, but for the first time, there was a foundation to build upon. Ethan turned to look at his father one last time. The man's face reflected the weight of understanding, a recognition that the easy path of deception and control was over. There would be consequences, yes, but they would be fair, measured, and guided by truth. And for Ethan, that was enough. He walked out of the living room, feeling a clarity he had never known. The storm of betrayal, anger, and resentment had reached its peak. And he had emerged not as a victim, not as a fighter, but as a master of his own destiny. The path of revenge had been tempting, but choosing restraint, justice, and accountability had brought him far more satisfaction than any act of vengeance could. Outside, the world continued in its ordinary rhythm. Birds chirped, cars passed, and neighbors went about their routines. Inside, a quiet revolution had occurred. Ethan had drawn the line, claimed his power, and ensured that no one could manipulate him again. He had not destroyed anyone, but he had reshaped the relationships, the rules, and the future of his family. The lesson was clear. Revenge may seem like a solution, but its satisfaction is fleeting. True power lies in control, in justice, and in refusing to perpetuate the cycles of harm that betrayal can create. Ethan had learned that the hard way, through observation, patience, and decisive action. And now he finally felt the peace that comes from being both strong and wise. Ethan's journey was not over, but a crucial chapter had ended. He had faced the ultimate confrontation, chosen wisely, and emerged stronger. His father would have to adapt. Daniel would have to step up. And Ethan would continue to navigate the complex path of trust, responsibility, and justice. The revenge he had imagined as fiery and destructive had transformed into something deeper, something lasting. He had learned that the most satisfying victory was not in punishment, but in reclaiming control, restoring balance, and standing tall.